Hi guys, welcome back to the Mina Does Art Stuff YouTube channel. My name is Mina and on this channel we do art stuff. Okay, today we are back with the colour comparison series and we are going to be taking a look at burnt siennas today. So when I was going through all of my earth tone colours to decide which ones I was going to do, I realised I had a lot of burnt siennas. So I put them all together on one sheet and we have 11 to look at today. We are going to start with Windsor and Newton's burnt sienna, and that is down here. And that one takes a minute to reactivate. So whilst I'm waiting for that, I will tell you I am using Arches 100% cotton cold pressed paper and my Vinci Coloneo size 8 round brush. I will have these and all the different paint brands linked down below in case you are interested in any of them. Now this burnt sienna is PR101. It's a very orange leaning burnt sienna and not fully activated yet. It's not the strongest, I will say. It's definitely a weaker burnt sienna than some of the others we will look at, and it is far from being my favourite version of this pigment. I don't use burnt sienna a whole lot, but this one, and actually this one is a pan of burnt sienna. It's not one that I filled from a tube, and even so, because Windsor and Newton actually say that their tube paints aren't supposed to be left to dry and form them into pans, but I've always done that and never had any issues. But this is a pan of their paint, so it's actually just, you know, this particular formulation is designed to be re-wet from a pan, and it is really hard to get a lot of pigment from this one. I don't usually have this trouble with other Windsor and Newton paints. Once you let them sit for a bit they're fine, but this one was definitely not cooperating that well today. Next up we have Schmincke's burnt sienna. Theirs is an interesting mix. Burnt sienna is typically a single pigment, but Schmincke have PR101, which is not odd, but they also have PBK9 in their mix, which is a black, which is a bit odd. Don't often see black in burnt sienna. Actually, I think this is the only mix that we have on this sheet. Burnt sienna can be a moderately granulating colour. Next up we have Rosa Gallery, and their burnt sienna is a PR101. I think all the rest except one are PBR7, so we'll get to that in a second. I find that PR101 burnt siennas are very orange leaning in their undertone. Which I don't mind. I do quite like an orange, a rusty orange, like this sort of, this is my kind of orange that I like. I don't like the bright, vibrant oranges. I like the earthy oranges. So these kinds of burnt siennas aren't actually that bad for me. I do quite like them. Next up we have Da Vinci's burnt sienna. Theirs is a PBR7, which is a pigment brown. And this is typically what I think of as a burnt sienna pigment. Don't want you to be off screen there. Okay, So you can see it's a bit more, actually on camera it's looking quite bright, but in person it's a bit more muted than some of the others. Okay, the next up we have Turner's Burnt Sienna, that's also PBR 7. Pop that open, there we go. It's just over here. And I know I've mentioned this before, but Turner watercolours, they tend to dry cracked and look not so great, but they work perfectly fine. So this is also a PBR 7. Next up we have Roman Szmal, and Roman Szmal have a really wide variety of earth tones, much like Daniel Smith. They have like a huge range. So the version of their Burnt Sienna that I have is called Blue Ridge Burnt Sienna. There we go, it's down here. Like I said, they have a few varieties of Burnt Sienna. I have their Blue Ridge Burnt Sienna. It's really lovely and pigmented. Apologies if you can hear that tapping noise in the background, it is raining. Fortunately I can't put off filming because I have a really busy week and this is my day to film, so I kind of need to get a few videos done today. That's the Roman Szmal. Next up we have White Knight's Burnt Sienna. Next up we have Daniel Smith's Burnt Sienna. Theirs is PBR 7. There we go. And Daniel Smith's Burnt Sienna is just different in its own way. It has a almost pinkish undertone to it. It's hard to describe. Like, it's still like an orangey brown, but I'm not sure if that's picking up on camera yet or not, but it just looks a bit different. It looks like it has a little bit of a pinkish undertone compared to some of the others. Don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but just when it's in the wash it looks like a really nice like start to a skin tone. Like, it wouldn't take much to make this into a beautiful skin tone compared to some of the others which look really orange in the undertone. This one just looks really natural, if that makes sense. So whilst I like some of the more orangey earth tones, as a Burnt Sienna, I kind of, at the moment, my preference is for the Daniel Smith. We'll see if that changes after all of these. Okay, next up we have Holbein, also PBR 7. And this is much more orange in its undertone, which I don't dislike. I don't know, I just really like the natural look of that Daniel Smith one compared to some of these others. Next up we have Mello. Their Burnt Sienna number 2, I think it's, or is it just Burnt Sienna? Yeah, Burnt Sienna number 2 I believe it's called. Is it? Who said it called to me? Oh no, just Burnt Sienna. Sorry, because some of the earth tones, they have a version 1 and version 2. Alright, so this is that Burnt Sienna down here. Their version is PR 102. So it's the only PR 102, but it's another earth pigment. And this is a lot darker than a lot of the other Burnt Siennas we have on the palette, on our sheets today rather. This reads more like a burnt umber than a Burnt Sienna in my mind. do like a nice warm brown, so I do not dislike this colour, but I'm not sure if I think this is a fair representation of a burnt sienna compared to the other colours on our swatch sheet today. And finally we have Paul Rubens Burnt Sienna, I think. I can't remember what they call this actually. I don't think it's called Burnt Sienna. I don't know if they do have one called Burnt Sienna, but this is, again, I don't think this is an accurate depiction of a burnt sienna. So the one they call Burnt Sienna looks more like a burnt umber to me, and they have one called Umber which looks more like a burnt sienna, but we're going to go with the Burnt Sienna since that's what it's named. It is also a PBR 7. So that's the right pigment code, but spoiler alert, burnt umber also uses PBR 7. Actually, a lot of earth tones use PBR 7. So there again, it's hard to know which one is which. Again, not my favourite. I'm not really a fan of the standard earth tones that come in the Paul Rubens set. It's just, they're not great in my opinion. Okay, so that is all of these swatched now, all of the burnt siennas. And I'm going to set this aside to dry and we will come back and take a look at it a bit later. We are back to take a look at the burnt siennas today. Alright, so first off, straight off the bat, Paul Rubens and Mello, their burnt sienna does not look like the rest. Their burnt sienna looks more like a burnt umber, and if I grab my sheet with the burnt umbers on them, you'll see what I mean. It sort of fits in with this page a lot more. The burnt umbers, burnt siennas there, whereas the Paul Rubens umber fits in more with the burnt siennas. So this is where naming from different brands can be a bit confusing, especially from some of the more Eastern brands. So Paul Rubens is from China, Mello is from South Korea. Some of the naming conventions aren't the same as with Western watercolours. So, or watercolours made in Western countries like America, UK, Europe. So it's worth bearing that in mind when you're looking at different colours. Okay, so back to burnt sienna. My favourites, definitely like the Daniel Smith. I'd say Da Vinci's also really nice. It has this really nice soft granulation happening here, which is really pretty. And for the more orangey burnt siennas, it's interesting. So I also really like the Roma Szmal Blue Ridge burnt sienna, which is slightly darker and richer, but I also really like Turner and the White Knights as well. I think they're very similar in colour. It's interesting because I do like a good earthy orange, but I prefer something more along the lines of a quinacridone burnt orange or a quinacridone gold for like a earthy orangey sort of tone, or to mix one myself. I do really like this one as a brown, just generally as a brown. I like that. I like warm browns, so I'm kind of quite drawn to that. I'm not particularly drawn to either of these, although the Paul Rubens burnt sienna has some really interesting granulation happening, which I was not expecting. That was a surprise. That was definitely a surprise. I was not expecting that. But yeah, otherwise I think Da Vinci, Daniel Smith and Roma Szmal are my favourites. And with Roma Szmal, it's specifically the Blue Ridge burnt sienna. They have various versions of burnt sienna, so just want to make that clear. Alright, so that's it for this video. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time.